Hello and welcome. With domestic dissent and regional tensions continuing to dominate its agenda, how can India resolve its challenges and realize its potential as a global power? Separatist demonstrations have erupted again in Kashmir, with Indian security forces killing 100 protesters. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called for an immediate end to the violence and appealed for restraint by all parties. Meanwhile, ties with Pakistan remain fragile over Kashmir and the Mumbai attacks of 2008 carried out by Pakistani extremists. India is also engaged in a frantic race with an increasingly assertive China for domination of South Asia. So on today's show we ask, how can India deal with some of its most critical challenges in order to become a global force? Don't forget, we'll take your SMS and emails on the show. Well, joining me today in New York is India's Minister of External Affairs, Mr. S.M. Krishna. Minister, thank you for your time. It's good to have a chance to talk to you. Let me start by asking you about Kashmir. Of course, the world is seeing as what's going on as pretty much as a mess. We've got the public protests growing. There's even more force being used by Indian security forces. More than 100 people killed in just a few months since the protests began in June. Now, the India all-party delegation that went to Kashmir was ignored by many of the separatist leaders, and many said it was a publicity stunt, that mission. Why leave it so late to go and send that delegation?
I think it would be a gross misstatement to say that it was a publicity stunt. I was present at the all-party meeting that took place, which the Prime Minister convened. There, a threadbare discussion lasting more than 5 hours was done. I think an in-depth analysis of the prognosis of the Kashmir issue was discussed by all the heads of various political parties. And at the end of the day, it was the unanimous recommendation of the all-party conference that in order to understand the pulse of the people of Kashmir, it is necessary that the all-party delegation go to Kashmir, go to Srinagar, and then study the ground realities, talk to all those who matter, in spite of the fact that over a period of time, 2 elections have been held.
I think
very recently, the Lok Sabha elections have been conducted, and these elections were boycotted by these separatist leaders, and they asked people not to go exercise their franchise. But in spite of it, the people defied it. The people went, exercised their franchise, their democratic right. And what does this indicate?
But I wonder, Minister, with them being out on the streets with the protests involving the public, general public, it's not just the separatists that are out there protesting. India seemed to be slow in its response, and people have been dying in the meantime.
Well, India is quite conscious of its responsibilities towards the people of Kashmir, Yes, we might, our response might have been a bit delayed, but surely there has been a response, And we are in touch with various groups, various schools of thought in Srinagar itself, And I'm sure that this is an important initiative by the Prime Minister to send the all-party leaders, And it is not going to be an end by itself, I think this is a process which perhaps is going to be long drawn out.
Well, I wonder, is there any interest in reviving the so-called Musharraf-Manmohan formula, which to say, to quote General Musharraf from 2006, is self-governance with a joint management system at the top for both sides of the line of control, and you can make the LOC irrelevant?
Well, this was made at a time when Mr. Musharraf was totally in charge of Pakistan. But unfortunately, today Pakistan is altogether a different entity, There is the civilian leadership, all right, but there are also others, who call the shots, So as a result of that, whether that Musharraf formula would be advocated by the present leadership is to be seen.
A couple of emails to you from our viewers, if I may. So we had a large number of viewers who wrote in about Kashmir. Just a couple I can put. The first one from a viewer by the name of Syed Ilyas Wasti, who wrote into our Facebook page, said, India's dream of becoming a global power is through Kashmiri genocide. A result of their power is disaster. And the second came from our Twitter account from someone tweeting. Mossaddiq wrote in saying, why is India reluctant to resolve the Kashmir issue so peace can prevail in the region? Now, of course, the separatists call for independence, which India says unacceptable. So with that situation, how can you ever find a framework that could work?
Well, the Constitution of India provides for every Kashmiri to air his grievances, to air his aspirations, And then, duty bound, the government and the representatives of the people, elected by the people, are certainly going to address to these concerns, And India does not have any illusions about its global role, whether one likes it or not, It is the rest of the nations, which have come to recognize India as a global power in the making, So we have to fulfill our international obligations in that framework, in that context, So India cannot be blamed, if we are growing at 8% every year, and then we are hoping that it would be a double-digit growth formula from 2011-12 onwards, I think, the Indian people's resilience, their resourcefulness, their innovativeness, all comes into play. Our technology, the people, the human resources that we have, the universities, produce thousands of graduates, and all this makes what India is today.
I'll ask you more about other topics. Just want one more question on Kashmir, if I may, to you, sir, from in response basically to what the Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi had to say on our show when we spoke with him earlier in the week. He condemned the use of violence by Indian forces in Kashmir. This is what he said.
Today, Indian intelligentsia, Indian Parliament, and Indian journalists are saying, hey, stop passing the buck. We have a local indigenous problem, recognize it. What is happening in occupied Kashmir today is women, children, without weapons, non-violent, protesting. Thousands of them.
How do you respond?
Well, my esteemed friend, Foreign Minister Qureshi, if he can help India as a friend, it is by not letting infiltrators cross from across the line of actual control, and then create tensions in Kashmir, and in the illegal occupation that Pakistan is with reference to Jammu and Kashmir, parts of Jammu and Kashmir. I think if Mr. Qureshi can vacate those areas, and then the personality of Jammu and Kashmir in its entirety is allowed to bloom, is allowed to grow, is allowed to assert itself, I think he will be doing the greatest service to the people of Kashmir, to the people of Srinagar, Then again, talking about Foreign Minister Qureshi, I have offered, the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has offered, that we are willing to talk to Pakistan on every conceivable subject that they want to have,
Yeah, I know you're meeting with him.
Including Kashmir, including Siachen, including Sir Creek, and various other issues,
I know your meeting with him in July was inconclusive, and you've been pressing Pakistan to act quickly on getting those accused of the November 26th Mumbai attacks. To what extent do you feel Pakistan isn't doing enough to rein in the militants?
Now,
I know you're saying...
I think Pakistan needs to do some introspection, The composite dialogue was doing extremely well, We had made significant progress on very many areas. Why did it come to an abrupt end? We have to go back to what happened in Mumbai and who was responsible for what happened in Mumbai, In the beginning, Pakistan disowned those people, saying that they are stateless persons, But ultimately, when proof of a quality which could not be questioned was produced, they had to grudgingly accept that all of them were Pakistani nationals, you know. And now what is it that they have done? They have examined 2 witnesses, you know, whereas we had examined about 90 odd witnesses, and then Kasab, who was the remaining terrorist, you know, who is in our jails, you know, he is found guilty, and then he has been sentenced, and then now the appeal is before the Supreme Court, you know. So I think if we believe in rule of law, if we believe that what Pakistan did, in spite of repeated assurances that has been given to us from 2004 onwards, you know, saying that Pakistani territory will not be used for hostile India or anti-India propaganda, you know. But why are they tolerating the infrastructure of terror, you know?
It's time to take a short break. When we return, the China syndrome. Is the US positioning India as a counterforce to Beijing's rising aspirations? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Is India being positioned as a strategic US ally to counter the force of China, which is considered by both nations as a common military and economic rival? Discussing that with me is India's Minister of External Affairs, S.M. Krishna. Let's get back to our conversation. Now, Minister, India has very close ties with Afghanistan. New Delhi has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into developmental projects there. But after 8 years, the Taliban is, 8 years after the Taliban being driven from power, Afghanistan still is mired in corruption and fraud and violence. Is India investing in a lost cause there?
Well, with Afghanistan, we have civilizational connections, you know. Our relationship goes back to centuries before, and we have a very cordial relationship with Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is invariably equated with Pathans, you know. And in all the urban centers in India, you will find Pathans, you know. And those Pathans are a living example of our relationship with Afghanistan. You know.
Well, politically, does it help isolate Pakistan, though?
Yeah. Well, our relationship between 2 countries is certainly not aimed at either isolating or integrating a 3rd country, you know. It is independent of our relations with Pakistan, and it is independent. India's relations with Afghanistan is independent of Afghanistan's relationship with Pakistan, you know. So I don't think that there is any substance in that accusation against India that we are trying to isolate X, Y, Z country.
China is a big player, of course, in the region, and China is trying to extend its sphere of influence throughout South Asia through a network of highways and ports that go from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Myanmar, called the String of Pearls. Now, how does India regard this project and what it potentially does in terms of encircling India? How do you respond to that?
Well, China is our big neighbor, and then with which we have a good relationship, and we certainly are looking forward to working with them, not only in the region, but even in global matters.
Although you're competitors too, you're fighting for the same resources. And
I think Dr. Manmohan Singh has addressed this question, I think, in a very succinct manner and in a very deliberative manner. He has said that there is space for both India and China, you know. We could be competitors and we could also be complementary to each other, you know. We are helping out the countries in Africa. We are helping out the countries in Southeast Asia, you know. China also could be doing similar things, you know.
Sorry, Minister, I was going to ask you, in the middle of all this, you have issues such as the long-running dispute, border dispute with China over the Arunachal Pradesh area. And when you have those outstanding, can you have that kind of cordial relationship?
Well, Arunachal Pradesh is an indivisible part of India, and that has been repeatedly stated by us, and we continue to stick to that position, But that doesn't mean to say that just because China has a different view about Arunachal Pradesh, our relationship should get soured, I think we have very recently the President of India, our Rashtrapati ji, visited China, and I myself went to China, and then I've had useful meetings with my counterpart, the Foreign Minister of China, and there also have been similar exchanges from the Chinese side, and we are celebrating the 60th year of our diplomatic relationship, which is being celebrated as India's year in China and China's year in India. So these are all developments, which go to prove a point that India and China can happily live together as good neighbors.
Now, there are others, though, watching who might have a vested interest in that kind of power bloc being a little separated, or perhaps even using India as a counterforce to China's influence in the region. The US, for example, is very effusive now in its relationship with India, and I know that President Obama has lumped Afghanistan and Pakistan now in the AFPAC, appointing Richard Holbrooke there. India, on the other hand, is seen as the growing power in Washington, also driven perhaps by this desire to make India the counterforce to China, do you think?
Well, if India is growing at 8% annually, I think it cannot escape the notice of other developed countries. If United States has a different estimate of India, I think that is largely because of our bilateral relationship with that country. There is so much of commonalities between India and United States. We are democracies, thriving democracies. Today, President Obama made a speech at the United Nations where I was present. He mentioned about the thriving democracy in India, and then he mentioned about how we became free, So these are indicative of the fact that India is emerging on the international ferment as a power, responsible, mature, and purposeful. And we would like to help that peace and tranquility between China and India on the borders,
No.
Let me assure you, Mr. Khan, that I was recently, last year, I was in China, and then I met Premier Wen Jiabo, And then when we were talking about the borders, I think Premier Wen Jiabo made this salient point. He said, the borders, when I said that they are very tranquil, he said, not a single bullet has been fired. I think you couldn't get a more eloquent testimony than what Premier Wen Jiabo said.
But no fear of being manipulated by Washington's agenda in the region, in East Asia and Asia?
Well, India is too independent for anybody to maneuver India, I think one thing which has to be said, since 1947, thanks to Mahatma Gandhi and Prime Minister Nehru, they were fiercely independent. They were conscious that they would not only be independent, they would be seen to be independent in formulating their foreign policies, in taking decisions which is right, when put to a test, So we take decisions on the merits of the issues involved.
Many say that India, if it was more proactive in its race against China economically and socially in the region, it could move much faster if it wasn't preoccupied with Pakistan. Is there a danger you've got your eyes in the wrong place?
Well, is there an idealistic set of circumstances than that, If India and Pakistan can live peacefully, if India and Pakistan can reduce their defense budgets, if India and Pakistan could trust each other, then I think that would be a very ideal kind of a situation for both of us to bloom, both of us to prosper. But unfortunately, there is mistrust, and it is Dr. Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister's desire that deficit in terms of trust has to be addressed. I think my journey to Islamabad, July this year, was made with the best of intentions. We wanted to explore the possibilities of how our two countries can get along together, And India continues to tread that path of reason,
About 1 in 6 people in this world are Indian, yet India still doesn't have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. What are you doing about that?
Well, I think we are getting hopefully elected to the Security Council as one of the non-permanent members sometime in October. And well, India believes, along with other countries like Brazil, like South Africa, like the IPSA countries, that United Nations will have to reflect the contemporary realities, Well
then, Minister, we have to leave it. I thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Khan. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter, where we'll keep you notified on upcoming shows, and you can send us questions and comments to pose to our guests. That's it from me and the teams in New York and Washington. We'll see you next time.